I'm Christophe, and I'm going to talk about how climate change is affecting seabirds population in Svalbard through sea ice retreat and Atlantification. So let's start by talking about the trends and the threats to global seabirds population. Here you can see a graph showing the population trends in seabirds in the world. And you can see that many species are currently in decline, almost 50%. And invasive species, bycatch, and climate change are the main threats to seabirds population. And I think that in Svalbard, the main threat is probably the climate change. Not least because the Arctic has warmed much faster than the rest of the world. It's known as Arctic amplification. And as you can see from the graph above, which shows the global temperature anomalies over a big period of more than 100 years, the Earth has been warming. And as you can see from the map below, which shows the temperature anomalies in 2020, the Arctic shows the highest anomalies. And in the Arctic, the Svalbard archipelago is a very important breeding ground for millions of seabirds of about 17 species. And these species can be divided in two groups, two categories. The typically Arctic species, such as the little oak, the Brunic guillemots, or the iconic ivory gull. And these species breed exclusively in the Arctic. And the other categories is boreal species, such as the black leg kittiwake, the Atlantic puffin. And these species have a larger distribution range and can also be common in northern temperate environments, such as UK, by example. And some of population of these species are monitored annually as part of research programs. And this map shows that the long-term monitoring sites for several species under CPOP and MOSH program. And at this site, seabird population are counted each year, and which allow us to estimate the overall health of the population. By estimating the growth rate from the count data, we can determine whether population is increasing or decreasing. So, as you can see from this graph, the boreal populations in red are doing better overall than those of Arctic species in blue. And these general trends are also evident in the fjords, where Arctic species are gradually declining. I won't have the time to talk about all the species in the fjord, so I will use two examples to discuss the role of sea ice and Atlantification on the population dynamics of seabirds in the fjord. The little oak, an exclusively Arctic species that feed only on copepods and mainly one species in Svalbard water, the Calanus glacialis, and the kittiwake, which has a larger distribution range and feed on small fish such as polar cod and also crustaceans and other marine invertebrates. And in Isfjorden and Kongsfjorden, the little oak and kittiwake populations are really closely monitored to estimate the animal survival and the breeding success of birds. So, what you can see here, survival trends are different between the two species. The little oak show a clear decline in survival over time, while the kittiwake show a relative stable trend. And concerning the breeding success, we show that both species show a decline. However, it should be noted that in seabirds, the main driver of the population growth rate is the survival parameter, suggesting that the little oak population is doing worse than the kittiwake population. Since the monitoring on these species began, significant changes have been observed in sea ice concentration in the fjords and around Svalbard waters. And these images show sea ice concentration on the 1st April in 2003 and 2021. So we can see a clear difference between the two. And sea ice concentration in the foraging areas of kittiwakes and little oak, here in red, has also strongly decreased. And the graph above shows a trend of sea ice concentration in this area over the last few years. And understanding how these changes affect seabirds population in the fjord is not an easy task, but using the long-term population monitoring data and this sea ice data, we were able to test the effect of changing sea ice condition on survival and breeding success. And the model shows that the little oak is affected by changes in sea ice. And these graphs show that the sea ice concentration have a positive effect on both survival and breeding success. This means that generally in years with a lot of sea ice, the survival and breeding success are better. And we think that this sea ice effect is related to their foraging strategy. And through a bottom-up process which suggests that a lower trophic level in the biological network affect the higher trophic levels by means of resource restrictions. And we know that the little oak feed mainly on one species of copepod, and this species is highly dependent on sea ice. So, put simply, when sea ice concentrations are high, copepods of this species are more abundant, providing more food for the little oak. And conversely, when sea ice concentration is low, the food resources for little oaks is reduced. However, this is more complex than it seems, and many other factors may need to be considered. By example, through Atlantification, the lower trophic level around Svalbard have undergone significant changes. And we are, as the name suggests, we are finding more and more Atlantic species, such as an Atlantic copepod, Calanus finmarchicus. And this species is increasing in Svalbard water and in the foraging areas of little oak. And this graph shows a proportion of Atlantic prey, so the Calanus finmarchicus, consumed by the little oak chicks in Kongsfjorden and Isfjorden. And we can see a clear increase from 2013. So due to the reduction of sea ice and Atlantification, little oaks have seen a decline in their main prey. So, but they are more or less adapting by consuming a new prey that has become more abundant, except that the energy properties of these prey are not the same. The Arctic species, Calanus glacialis, is a very rich in lipids, whereas the Atlantic species is not. So, such a transition to a potentially smaller and less lipid-rich copepods could affect the flow of energy and have consequences for individuals. And then this could lead to a population decline. The kittiwakes breeding in Kongsfjorden and Isfjorden appear to be much less sensitive to sea ice. And as can be seen from this graph, the survival is unaffected by sea ice concentration, and only a little effect on breeding success was observed. But as with the little oak, the same bottom-up processes should be worked here. As Arctic species associated with sea ice are also the main prey of kittiwakes in Svalbard, and these species are also declining, such as the polar cod, which has been in strong decline for several years. However, black-legged kittiwakes have a less strict diet than the little auk, and they can eat on fish and crustaceans and other marine invertebrates. So, and again, Atlantification could play a role here as new Atlantic species appear in the diet of kittiwakes. As shown on this graph showing the frequency of observation of Arctic and Atlantic prey consumed by kittiwakes in Kongsfjorden. And we think that the life history traits of these species, kittiwakes, mean that it is likely to adapt more easily to changes in sea ice in the fjord, more than the little auk. So, to conclude, the message to keep in mind is that the Svalbard community is changing. Changes in prey are likely to be an important factor, and the quality and availability of prey is affected by sea ice retreat and Atlantification. So the seabird community in Svalbard Fjord, previously dominated by Arctic species, is increasingly dominated by boreal species, as we can see on this graph, showing the number of breeding pairs increase. However, it is important to note that many other factors can be related to climate change and can likely affect seabirds in the future for both Arctic and boreal species, such as avian flu, parasites, or predation by polar bears. Thank you for your attention.
Christophe, is there, we have time for 3 questions, I would say. Yes, Martin first. That was far.
Can I walk a little bit first?
Thank you. You showed that in 2013 there was an increase in the fraction of Atlantic zooplankton, was it so? There was a dramatic change there.
This one?
There was a time series. There, yeah. So what happened in 2013? Except that, I mean, there must be something that forced that. Do you have any clue on that, what that was?
I'm not sure. I think it's maybe about Atlantification, and yes, it's a real increase, but I don't know what is the mechanisms underlying that. Maybe Geir can say more.
It was an increase in the seawater temperature and so on. We had very high temperature in the sea, so I think that's the main reason.
Yes, maybe Thomas has something more with the coastal current there? No?
I was just thinking of Tobias' talk earlier today, the change in coastal current.
Yeah, I was about to say, we were just laughing about it. It's exactly overlapped with the same period, so maybe we should look into that.
Yes.
No, actually, I had a question, because in southwest Greenland we have seen that the diets of little auk has changed toward Temisto and krill and small capelin, rather than cookbugs. Is that something that is potential here as well?
I really don't know. Maybe Geir.
No, we haven't seen that. We know that they are eating polar cod, and so on, but it has been dominated in recent years by Finnmarkicus and Glaciers, so we haven't seen that they have changed to other species and so on, as you have said.
Yes, then it's Robert here.
Contact sport. So one of your first slides, fantastic talk by the way, really, really nice. One of your first slides, you showed the different rates of increase for the different species. What's the deal with gannets? Like, why are they just, there's a break in the y-axis that they're increasing so much faster than everything else.
Can you repeat, please?
I mean, it's just this huge outlier, right? Like and it's really consistent too. There's very little error in it. The gannet, the population growth rate of gannets is almost a factor of magnitude greater than everything else. Where are they coming from? Why are they so dominant? They're pretty big birds too, right? So they need a lot of food.
Maybe take the microphone.
The thing is that the gannets has been establishing themselves on Bjørnøya, so it has been a very rapid increase, you know, in that colony. But they haven't come to Svalbard, so it's only there where we see this kind of building up. And these birds, they came from northern Norway, so they have come up here, established, and now there are quite many of them.